Today I'm going to be tying a simple bucktail streamer. I'm going to start with about 20 to 30 wraps of 0.015 lead-free wire. And I like to spin it to break it off. And the thread I'll be using is a black UTC 70. And what I do is I make wraps around the weight just to secure it. And then take my thread all the way back to the bend of the hook and then bring it forward to the front of the weight, and then I'll grab some red yarn, and I like to wet my fingers and then twist it a little bit where I'll be tying it in just to kind of keep everything together. You want to tie that in on top of the hook all the way back to the bend. And I like to cut it just a little ways past the bend of the hook. And you can use whatever you like for this. I use an old toothbrush to sort of rough up the tag of the yarn, separate the fibers. And because of the way this yarn was corded, I have to really rough this up a lot. Otherwise it will split off in a bunch of different directions rather than going back. But now that that's done, I'm going to take some white yarn, if I can find it. There it is. And cut a small strip of that. And separate one strand. And just sort of start pulling at that strand to get all the fibers out into sort of a nice wispy looking clump. Once you've gotten that to a good point, you take off a small amount at a time and form a fairly thin dubbing noodle on your thread. And because the yarn that I'm using is so light, it is a little difficult to dub, because my fingers do kind of slip around on the noodle as I try to twist it. You'll probably be able to notice how I'm not trying to get everything perfectly covered up. I happen to like some of the red and black from the underbody showing through. I feel it gives it more of a fry look to the pattern. Or at least a very young fish. And that should be good enough. There. And you want to form an area that goes 1/8 of an inch back from the eye of the hook. This is where we'll be tying in the wing. And I first like to get 4 strands of pearl crystal flash. And I'll tie them in so that they extend a good ways back from the bend, so that I have room when I need to cut them to length. And with that done, I like to cut them to the base of that red tag. It gives it a nice sort of shimmer without being too flashy. And then next, and I might have to do this a few times depending on how it goes, but we want to take a small clump of olive bucktail and hold the tips and strip out all the shorter fibers. And I like to stack my bucktail, and to do that I just snip them down to length so that they can fit into my stacker without coming out while I'm stacking them. You just need to get them roughly aligned, don't have to be too perfect. And I like it so they extend about a hook gap back from the tag. And make sure that they stay on top of the hook. You can snip the butts off at an angle. And I'm going to tie in one more section, and for this I like to use the hair from this part of the bucktail. It gives it a nice contrast. And I won't use as much for this. And I'll also stack these. Again, you only need to do that loosely. You don't need it to be perfect. And then once you have that tied in, you can snip the butts off at a slightly steeper angle. I like to use the eye to sort of gauge what angle I should be cutting the butts off at. And then to form the head, I usually start wrapping my thread near the eye at sort of a 90-degree angle to the shank, or a 45-degree angle, sorry. And build up a nice head on the fly. And once you've gotten it to a point where you like it, you can just whip finish. I like to do 2, just to be safe. You can then cut your thread, add some cement or UV gel to the head, and you'll be good to go. A simple bucktail streamer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.